All right, in this video, maybe you guys have watched my other one, but I'm going to go into a lot more detail in this video, so make sure you check this one out as well. I'm going to talk to you about what things to look at to make your VW engine run cooler, and the most common reasons why they run hot. And I'm going to kind of go in most order, so some of the stuff might be repetitive, some of you guys in the beginning. But later on in the video, I'm going to get into a lot more detail on things that I didn't get into in the last video. But first of all, before I start, I wanted to address something that seems like everybody who watches my channel seems to think that this is a problem. The fuel filter being right here, okay, and for engine fire. Just so you know, I worked in a shop, okay, 30 years ago. I checked with another shop that's still open today, that's working on VWs for like 35, 40 years. And none of us have ever heard of, seen anything, an engine fire caused because of this position of the fuel filter right here. Just so you know that, okay? The reason that people get it confused is because they go, there was somebody that didn't have any clamps on theirs, and the clamp came off, or the clamp wasn't on it, and the fuel line came off and got the distributor wet with fuel, and that caused an engine fire. So they say it's because of the position of this fuel filter. We have never seen a car catch fire because of the position of that fuel filter. Just so you know that. The reason, other things we've seen engine fire real quick is because this hose here got rotten and didn't get changed. That's real common. Another common for engine fire is actually where the carburetor. So I'll just use this carburetor for just for demonstration purposes. See this little barb sticking out of the carburetor? On the stock Solex carburetors, for some reason, we've seen several that this part of the carburetor, this brass tube or copper tube, has come out of the carburetor, and that we have seen engine fire, and a lot of people blame it on the position of the fuel filter. That has never been the case in 30,000 cars. So if you want to make that comment, go ahead. Yeah, here's a Solex. This piece comes loose and falls out of the carburetor. Causes the most common cause for engine fire on a VW. And yes, we saw hundreds of cars come in with engine fire issues. So it's not like we're just willy-nilly, blaming this or whatever. I'm just letting you know, hundreds of cars, hundreds and hundreds, probably near thousands of cars. Never seen one actually from the fuel filter itself being in that position, just so you know. Okay, so now that that's out there, I'll go ahead and continue the video. Most common things, okay? These tubes here are missing, and those are not plugged off. If you have these tubes missing, there should be a freeze plug in there. And also, these holes need to be filled. So either you just put foil tape over them, foil tape, not duct tape. Foil tape works okay. Or just put a piece of metal over it, put a plug in it somehow, buy the tin that doesn't have holes in it, whatever. Make sure that those are not open. Because what happens is, how the cooling system works on a VW is the cool air comes in through the vents. On the late models, they have them on the deck lid as well. So there wasn't adequate, this was designed for a 40 horse, and it has a 1600 in it. So if you've got a bigger engine in and you don't have the extra vents, you might want to do something to compensate for that. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the cool air comes in the top, okay, goes in through the fan, goes out through the back of the car. So what happens is when you're driving down the road, air will recirculate, hot air will come in through these holes, and then it'll just get hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter inside the engine. So make sure that all your tin is here in the back. Make sure that your seal here is good. Okay, make sure that there's not really, this little bitty hole, that's not a big deal. Okay, it should be plugged up. The more sealed it is, the better. But You know, if it's just if it's like a small hole like that, that's not that big of a deal. But if it's these big ones, it is. It's definitely a big deal. It needs to be solved. Like they actually had little tin pieces that went around here, and you know, this is an aftermarket cylinder tin, so it doesn't have the holes for that. So yeah, a little bit of air leaks there. Not that big a deal. But if it's got, you know, if it has those, it does help a little bit. So the more sealed, the better. That's going to help you to keep your engine running cooler. I'm going to try to repeat myself, but if these tubes are missing, they need to have freeze plugs inside these holes. Air leaks from the fan shroud lets less air go into the cylinders. That's the theory there. And you don't want to have air, you know, blowing out of here before it goes down into your cylinders. Not good for making your engine run cooler. Here's a perfect example. Temporary. Put some foil tape over there, and that's aluminum foil tape. It's special. It's very, very sturdy. It has good glue on it. It stays on pretty nice. As a temporary repair, eventually this car is going to get heater boxes. So there's your freeze plug. That's what it's supposed to look like there. The number 2 thing, that's like number 1, okay? Number 2 would be your jetting in your carburetor not being right. Back in the 60s and 50s and 60s, when they made these cars, fuel formulas were different. We had leaded fuel. We had things a lot different than we do now. And so the jetting, especially with the alcohol in the fuels, some of them don't have alcohol, but they are formulated different. So I would still check your jetting and make sure it's correct for what you're doing. So your typical main jet, this is not a 1600, but if you have a 1600 engine, is typically 130 to 135, okay? Depending on whether you have a cam in it or whatever, and compression ratio, whatever you've got in there. I don't know what you have in it. So the jetting needs to be correct. So your main jet should be like a 130, 135, and that will make your engine run cooler. Having it run too lean, another huge reason why your engine is running hot. So if you notice here, this car, this bus has a merged exhaust system. This is an upgraded engine. This is a 1904. Anytime you have a performance engine, it's always a good idea to change from the stock deflectors below your cylinders to the cool tin or type 3 style. I'll go over the reasons why people say that that doesn't work. But the reasons why it works better is because with the larger engine and this exhaust system, you can't run all the tin that's underneath. If you notice, normally there's a nice piece of tin that goes underneath here. There's the heater box right here. So there's all this place here for the air to escape. So what you need to do is to control that air by using a type 3 tin. I have one laying over here. Let's take a look at it. This is a type 3 air deflector. Just so you know, there is a bulletin out that came out in the early 70s, late 60s from Volkswagen that says that these do not work on a type 1. Now, I just want you to think about this for a second. If it did work better, do you think they would admit it? Of course they wouldn't. The reason they wouldn't admit it is because they'd be open to a ton of lawsuits because they'd say that you didn't do your engineering right. It's very simple. These things actually work really well. We tested these in the 80s. If I recall correctly, it was somewhere between 20 and 30 degrees less temperature on the engine we tested it on. It was a performance engine, so just so you know that. I don't remember the exact numbers. I don't remember exact. We just used we had a head temp sensor on the car and drove it before and after, and it was an average of different ways driving it, city, highway, whatever. We tested it a bunch of different ways, and it definitely worked. But yet, yes, there was a bulletin out on VW. If you want to believe it, go ahead. If you don't want to, that's fine too. That said that these don't work on a Type 1. So here's what the stock one looks like. It looks like this. This is the Type 3 or cool tin. That of course says that it doesn't work, but it does. We've tested it. I don't know, you can believe it or not. And the theory behind it, let me tell you what it is. Okay, this one between the cylinders, we'll mock that up for you. This is the stock one. It went between the cylinders, and what it does is it diverts the air from going straight down through the middle around some of the cylinder, and then the cylinder tin kind of comes up to about right here, okay? And then it has another deflector piece that goes down. And so if you notice on the merged system that you can't run all of those other pieces. So if any of those pieces are missing, it will run hotter than original. If you have this style, you have a stock engine and you have all of the tin on it, it works pretty good. You probably don't need these. But if you have a performance engine in any way, shape, or form, it might be a good idea to go with them. And let me tell you how they work. What they do is it actually, see these square holes here, meter the air that goes around the cylinder. So the air goes all the way around the cylinder and goes out this hole. Here's kind of a mock-up with the cylinder tin. So what it does is if you look down here in this portion, it makes it pretty much so that the air has to be managed to go out of these holes. It can't come out over here. It can't come out anywhere else. It has to come out of these holes. So these were designed for a Type 3, and this hole is metered so that that engine won't overheat. So we know that that is adequate for the cylinders. So our question is where does your combustion happen? Does it happen in the cylinders or does it happen in the heads? Anybody can write that comment down. Okay, it happens in the heads, guys. It happens at the top of your cylinder and in your head. And when it happens that way, most of your heat for your engine is in your cylinder heads. So the most important thing is to manage the air that goes around your cylinders so that you can divert more of the air to the head. Makes sense? That's what these do. They do work, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Take it or leave it. And I have tested it. We found good results with it. So a lot of people say that it doesn't work. There's a lot of people that say it doesn't work. Heard tons and tons of it. I've actually read the bulletin many, many years ago. Read it again and kind of deciphered that we did what we did years ago, which is, that they were just trying to protect themselves from lawsuit. So a couple of more things here. Another thing you can do to make your engine run cooler is if you have aftermarket, the cheap tin, there's a little piece that goes right on here on the dual port tin. Okay, it's a little piece. I don't have any of those dual port tin laying around, so I can't really show you all. Maybe I do. Let me look. No, I don't have any. But there's a little piece of tin that goes on here that's not on the aftermarket tin. So this is actually a 40 horse tin. So it's kind of a bad example, but there's a little piece that goes on here. So if you want to go around and swap meets, try and find an original one that has it's a little wing that goes on right here for the twin port tin. That is helpful. It will help your airflow better through your heads. That's another little tip. Another common problem is take your fan shroud off. Make sure that there's no crud between your cylinders. A lot of times it just builds up over time. You get some crud going between there. Make sure that the air can flow properly down from the fan shroud down through between your cylinders. Okay, this is a dual port head. See that little piece of tin right there? Make sure that it's there. A lot of times they get taken out. They don't put them back in. And there's a nice little hole there for the air to just be wasted. Doesn't get to flow out through the rest of the head. Needs to be there. All right, hopefully you guys can see this. You can see my hand going through there. See those holes, how they're nice and clear and open? Okay, a lot of times you'll get an aftermarket head. And some of the aftermarket heads, I'm moving my hand around so you can see those holes. Okay, you'll get an aftermarket head and those castings have a lot of, are not opened up. And so what happens, especially even this one right here, if you can see that little casting, that could be machined out a little bit and clean that up with a file. Okay, a lot of times the castings on your heads, especially on some of the aftermarket ones, typically not on the AA Performance big valve heads, they actually purposely open those up to make sure that the air flows through them better. And those are pretty cool. What you'll find a lot of times where your heat is generated is in these heads. So your main focus should be on the heads. A lot of guys go straight to oil. We'll go into that later, but the most important thing is these heads. If the air flows through these things better and is able to do its job and cool, that's going to help you the most. Okay, number one, head temp, number one. Number two, oil temp. So remember, make sure there's no crud in these holes as well. Sometimes there's a bunch of crud in there from, a little bit of oil leaking or seepage or something, and there'll be crud all jammed inside there. Make sure you clean that out really good. Make sure it's nice and clean. That'll help keep your engine running a little cooler. Another thing you can do is you can put in a doghouse fan shroud. That's what's on this one. I don't know if you can see back there, but behind here, there's a little doghouse behind the fan shroud. And what it does is, instead of the fan shroud being a stand-up cooler that's right here inside the engine, which is what was on the earlier engines, later ones all had doghouse, and the air will flow better to your head for your number 3 cylinder, which is the most common to get overheated, and it will allow air to flow out through the doghouse and out a little door in the back. All the tin for the doghouse needs to be there. There's a little chase that goes down. There's a little door back there. If you have the tin in the back, you definitely need to have your back tin in there so that hot air doesn't revert back and go back and get sucked into your fan. Another reason people run their engine hot with a doghouse. Now so we're going to get into the oil cooling stuff now. So number one is air. Okay, get that air to do its job and cool everything down. Number two is oil. So this engine here has something called a full flow system. So in addition to the oil cooler that's on it, which another thing you can do is if you really want to go a little further, you can modify a Type 4 oil cooler and put it on there. That's a little more elaborate. That's something that's like you need a little more skill to do, because you have to actually modify that doghouse and put some metal on it, do some welding, stuff like that. You can actually put a Type 4 cooler on it. It's like having 2 more cores in your radiator. So that has been done on one of my engines, not on this one. Okay, but and none of these things run hot. I actually pulled a hill in 4th gear, and towards the top I noticed it was getting a little hot. Dropped it down into the 3rd, went over the top of the hill, and then it cooled down within minutes, seconds actually. Cooled right down because the air is working properly and all this stuff that I have on here. So let's look at the oil cooler. Take a look at the oil cooling system I have on here. So if you see here, the side of the case has been tapped and a hose is added. You see that hose going back right there? And what that is that takes oil right from the pump and puts it back. I have it going through an oil cooler or a oil filter back there. Let's take a look. So if you can see, that's my oil cooler, all right? And if you can see, that's a cooling fan similar to what's on the newer car. That has a thermostat, if you can see, if I can get my finger right there. There's a thermostat right there, and as the engine temperature or oil temperature reaches a certain height, it will automatically turn that fan on and cool the oil down and then bring that back in the engine. So in addition to the air cooling properly, I have a oil cooler that actually, this thing takes, I think, 5 or 6 quarts of oil. I can't remember. And so it has additional oil in the system. So the oil's always getting recirculated and always going back in and cooling the engine down. In addition to all the air stuff that's done, it has the oil cooling stuff. Those things all will help your engine run cooler. And so another thing about air I just forgot. I'm going to go ahead and put it in here too. Okay, so they actually have, I believe, and I can't remember exactly, I'm not the engine guy. I usually just ask the people who know, and they'll tell me. And so I would suggest you do the same. They actually, I believe they have 4 different fans for this. So you have your 36 horse fan, you have your 40 horse fan, which I believe this one is. You have the 1600 fan, and you have a fan for the doghouse. They are all different. They have different amount of blades in them. Okay, you need to make sure that you have the right fan for your engine. Okay, a lot of times I've seen people have, and the doghouse fan is about, I'd say about 1/4 inch thicker than the other ones. So if you have a regular fan on a doghouse shroud, okay, it's not going to cool properly. So you need to make sure that it is the right fan for the engine. Very important. On this engine, you see that little pulley down? That's called a power pulley. That's for horsepower, not for cooling. It actually has a 40 horse fan on it. And the reason you do that is to try and get as much horsepower out of it as you can. It's only going down the track. This is a race engine only. That's what that's about. So if you have one of those little pulleys, not so good for cooling. Another really important thing that's overlooked so often is gear ratios and tire sizes. If your gear ratios are so your RPMs are too high on the freeway, you think more air and more cool. Actually, VWs kind of have a balancing act. There's an area in there that you need to be, I'd say, it's between, 2200. It's about the lowest, and that's far on the scale of low. I would say between like 2400 and close to 3500 RPMs on the freeway. If you're up above that substantially, it's going to make your engine run hot. It just does. For some reason, they have a balance in there. There's some kind of a balance. I'm just telling you about it. You can kind of figure out those numbers on your own. But if your tires are too short, let's say you got little bitty tires on there because you're trying to look cool. Okay, little bitty tires and your low profiles and all that stuff, and you don't have it geared, you don't have your transmission gearing reset to meet for that, your engine can run hot from that. So it's not a good idea it's trying to re-engineer. If you run everything original stock, it'll run fairly cool. They won't run very hot, but there are additional engineering things you can do to make them run a little cooler, and that's what some of the stuff I'm going over here. So this is like a 2007 engine, a little dirty in here right now. Got to get her cleaned out. Now some of the things on this one, you'll notice I have an aluminum case. They run a little bit hotter than the other engines, okay? And people will say, oh, well, I don't run those because they run hot. Listen, the volumetric efficiency of aluminum, it does not expand and contract as much as magnesium. It actually can run hotter and still be just as effective as it did, as the other. So it's kind of a catch-22. People say, oh, they run hotter, but they actually can. And if you have a good oil cool system like I showed you on the other one, that can help, that can overcome any of that engine heat that's caused by the engine case. Because remember, your heads are your number one. Case is kind of not a big deal, but you'll see people that will say stuff about that as well. Another thing you'll see on the bigger engines a lot of times is guys will have issues with the engine blowing oil out of it because of, number one, they have the wrong size tires and the gear ratios are off and your engine's running too many RPMs in the freeway. That's number one for those oil leaks. Number two is you need to have a breather system. So when you get a bigger engine, if you start doing that kind of thing, you need to have a breather system that will help cool your engine a bit, but it also helps keep it from leaking oil. So on this one, I have a small breather box. You can see it this hose goes behind. It's behind this fan shroud. There's two hoses that go from the valve cover back up to that same box. And then I also make sure that I have the one with the road draft tube on it. Because even though I have those hoses and all that, if I didn't have the road draft tube one on here, it would start to push oil out because it has too much pressure. So having the proper breather system for your engine is another good thing to do when you have a performance engine. If you have a 2-liter, or large 2-liter, then you need even a larger breather box. They have ones that are giant, big old things for race cars where they're running really high RPMs. And because these did not have a positive gate crankcase ventilation system, they had a road draft tube system, which this goes down. It normally had a little rubber cap on the end. I don't think I have the cap on it right now, but it helps it. The reason I don't have it on there is because I want more air to go out to not build up pressure. And some of the other things that happen are when you have a counterweighted crank, there's all that mass inside there, and it's almost like having a fan shroud around your your fan, which is your crankshaft, and that creates pressure inside your system, can create heat, and if it's not ventilated properly, so you need to make sure that that's done right as well. Another big issue, timing. A lot of people put too much advance into their car. The typical VW likes 28 degrees. Now, there's times when you can go more than that, but you got to have a lot of stuff to, a big cam, maybe lower compression, that you need to have that additional advance to run more than 28 degrees. But most of them like 28 degrees, just so you know, total advance. That's not your idle. If you watch my timing video, kind of show how to do that. I never use a static to check mine. I don't check it at idle. I check it at fully advanced. So when it's revved up, the highest it'll go, I run it to 28 degrees. That's another important thing to make sure it's right. Here's another look at that road draft tube. They had a little rubber cap that goes on in there, so you know. That's what that looks like. The later models, I don't think they had them. They had something else, I forget. I don't remember. I haven't worked on one of those in years, on the old fuel injection model, and most of them are done now. So anyway, hopefully another thing that can help too, in my opinion, is when you're building your engine, if you're trying to do some stuff, is put that performance cam in. What it will do is it will help your valve timing advance, and it'll also help what will also happen is you'll have better airflow going through your heads through the intake, and that can help. Even porting the head a little bit can help make it run a little bit cooler. Believe it or not, those things actually do work, because the flow going through the head actually will help. Resistance causes heat, right? Pressure causes heat. One more thing, I've just remembered something really important here. When you build your engine, you do something called check your deck height. So you run your piston all the way up at the highest point where it can be at, okay? And then what you do is you check the distance between the top of the barrel and the piston. And what a lot of guys do is they do something called barrel fire. Now, barrel fire creates a hotter fire. So originally, that spec, I believe it was like 50 to 60 thousandths. There's ways to run it tighter than that. I would just talk to a machine shop before you go and do it much tighter than the 50 to 60 thousandths. There's guys that are running as low as like 35. I'm not going to tell you to do that. And 40 is kind of, 45 I heard is okay, somewhere in there. But the spec for the car is 50 to 60, okay? But there's guys that what they'll do to try and lower their compression ratio is they make that really thick. So they'll make that like 70, 80, 90 thousandths. And when you have a lot more fire in your barrel instead of inside your cylinder head, okay, the way you combat that is you make your fire inside your cylinder head. What guys do is they'll do like this head's done right now, which is nice. I didn't realize this was even done. But if you see, that's a little stair step right there, okay? We used to call it step cutting the head. So instead of running too many shims to make too much barrel fire, so you'd have like 90 thousandths shim in there, we would take 30, 40 thousandths off of the head to make it fire in the cylinder head. Now, another thing you can do to combat that, versus going to having your heads machined and going through all that, is you could buy the performance heads from AA Performance, and they have a larger combustion chamber. In fact, typically you're going to have to make it smaller. So what they do is they open this up more, and because we've learned all this stuff over the years, and they actually have another thing that's nice with those same heads is they have a peanut size plug. So there's more meat here, okay, in here. It has larger valves, okay, and it has a thicker threads on the spark plug. So they've completely re-engineered the old school type heads, and they've made them so they have a larger combustion chamber, which is really, really important when it comes to barrel fire. If you have barrel fire, that's going to create heat, that creates detonation. In fact, I know guys who are racers who actually run zero. They'll run theirs to zero, where the piston is right at the top of the cylinder, and then they have a head gasket on here so that they have everything firing inside the head to get the most amount of performance out of the engine without detonation. So that barrel fire creates detonation, just so you know. Some guys will actually say that they machine down the edge of the piston, like right here. They'll sand the edge of the piston because that helps to lower the detonation. But some of the racers I've talked to actually feel like that is just taking a little bit of the compression away, so it doesn't really do that, they said. But you know, that's again up to you on that one. Barrel fire creates heat, creates running hotter from detonation. All right, I know I'm going to get a few people that are going to fight me on this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Okay, so a lot of people seem to think because a VW has low compression that they can run regular fuel in it. You can run regular gas because it has low compression. Let me put some light on this for you. VWs have a higher combustion temperature than almost any other gas engine. Okay, so yeah, it has low compression, but it has a high temperature. Because it has a high temperature, it makes it have a higher pressure. So the engine needs to have premium fuel. Now, the thing that people will always say is they go, well, back in the old days on my side of my car, it says 91 RON. And 91 RON translates to, I've heard all this stuff many times over, guys. I already know it all, okay? 91 RON, it converts into 87 octane. You can run 87 in your VW. Wrong. That's 87 leaded fuel octane. What's available now is unleaded fuel, and the formulas are different, and they put more alcohol in the fuel. Let me tell you, premium fuel, if you want your car to run cool, premium fuel, that's it should be number one in the whole video. But there's so many people that will just fight you on it. They'll say, oh no, it doesn't need it because it's low compression. You know, it's just like, hey, some people will just never learn. That's all I can tell you. Well, I'm talking about compression. I'll tell you, in those two buses, I'm running 8 3/4 in one of them and 9-to-1 compression in the other. And they don't run hot. And I'm running premium fuel, of course. But the reason I'm able to do that is because I'm running a really tight deck height, okay? And most of my fire is in the cylinder. So those are different reasons why. You can do a lot of different things, but you've got to figure out the right way to do it. And a lot of people just do it without doing it the right way, and they don't know that you have to do things a certain way to make it work right. So even in my 36 horsepower bug, I run premium fuel in it. It has like, I don't know what, 6.5 to 1 or something like that. And it's because it has a lot of more heat. You know, VWs are running up to like 300 degrees plus sometimes on the head temp, versus like your regular car. If you ran it up to 260, if you notice on your overheat gauge or whatever, if you ran it that hot, it would overheat. In a VW, that's more of a normal temperature. You're talking about a lot difference in combustion temperatures on VW. So run the premium fuel. It will help save your engine. It'll make it last longer. You have less detonation issues. If you don't have detonation, that lowers the temperature of the engine and will make it run longer and cooler. Well, guys, if your head's not spinning enough from this video, you can always watch it again. You can always watch it 2, 3, 4 times, maybe find a sector of it and just keep watching it over and over till you understand what I'm trying to explain in some of this stuff. Because I know some of this stuff is pretty far up there as far as, knowing what you're doing. But at least you kind of got an idea of things to look for in your car. At least, pull off the cylinders and check for rat's nests, things like that. That's a thing that happens all the time, like I said, or old junk in between the cylinders. Get some hot. That's the air not flow in the heads. Make sure that those ports in the heads are cleaned out. all these ports here, the air ports, all in your head. Make sure all the air ports are open. You know, I don't know how many I've seen where they have aftermarket heads on there, and almost every airport is plugged, completely plugged. And the engine's running 360 degrees, and the guy's like, I don't know what's going on, and it's running like 360 all the time. And it's like, well, you pull the heads off, and then they blame it on the cylinder. They blamed it on. I was looking at a post on the Sama, and they were blaming it on this, and it's like, dude, I think the heads were the big problem. This was probably helping, if anything else, because it's these little things right here even do a little bit more than the original. They actually bring more that air all the way around the head. Let's put them on and take a look. You just really need to make sure they're done and installed properly. I do have videos on that. They need to be installed properly. But if you can see, when this is bent right here, just kind of holding it up. But if you can see, this part goes over that portion of the head and helps the air go all the way around the head, and then works with this piece in the middle so that there's less room. The air has to go all the way around the head. All that stuff makes a difference, and it does run cooler. So I don't know. There's still people out there. They're going to say that these don't work. That's cool. Fine with them. So anyway, I hope that helped you guys out. Figure out how to make the engine run cooler. Jetting, big time. Another huge thing, like I was said earlier. Make sure you have all of those things right. And, you know, in the engine fire thing, you know, I just threw that in there because so many people just comment about that. You know, they have to comment about the fuel hose on that. And like I said, 30,000 plus cars. We kind of said how many cars you see a year. Oh, so many a year. How many did we see a year at the shop I worked at? And combine that all together. And I said, have you ever seen any of them actually catch fire because of that fuel filter itself? And we all said no. And that was a lot of guys that have seen a lot of cars, more than 30,000 of them. So maybe you've had that problem. You know, I don't know. Maybe it was an old filter. You know, I don't know. I don't know the whole situation. But personally, and everybody that I know that's in the business has never seen that. So good one. I'll talk to you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe. Let's see your comments.